What's up, guys? Now, the UFC card in Moscow has just kind of lost his main event, where Junior Dos Santos is going to be fighting Alexander Volkov, but it seems like Junior Dos Santos is suffering a bacterial infection and pulled out of the card, and this is only like, 18 days away from the card? So they need a replacement fight. And who do they go to? Yes, they've gone to Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy is going to be fighting Alexander Volkov on 18-day notice in Volkov's home country as the co-main event. I understand why they made it a co-main event. They don't want to jeopardize a main event and make it like some kind of weird thing, so they push Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Calvin Kattar as the main event. But another strange thing happened where that fight is still going to be 3 rounds. I think this is the first, unless you guys can correct me, I think this is the first, at least since the USADA era, since the Reebok era. I've never seen a fight go to a main event and not be 5 rounds. And it just seems strange because, coincidentally, Zabit is known to not have good cardio, right? Even for a 3-round fight, he gasses out. And he is a prospect that the UFC wants to build up, right? So it just seems way too coincidental that not only does Zabit get pushed to this card, he was supposed to fight in Boston in Calvin Kattar's hometown, so he gets pushed to Moscow, Russia, gets pushed up to the main event, and still kept as a favorable 3-round fight, which will favor him a lot more to win this fight, right? If the fight was ever going to be 5 rounds, Calvin Kattar would have a much bigger advantage of eventually catching Zabit as he gets tired and stuff like that. You know, the boxing of Calvin Kattar is really going to test Zabit's. So that just seems way too coincidental. But here's the thing, man. Greg Hardy getting thrown at Volkov is something none of us expected. A lot of people were saying they want to see him versus Derek Lewis or something like that, and you know, that makes more sense because of the stylistic collision. You know, Derek Lewis isn't the most technical fighter, he's kind of a brawler. A lot of technical differences between the two when you go into the details, but it's a lot more of a favorable matchup for Greg Hardy than Volkov. Volkov is much longer, much taller, much more precise, much faster with his punches, not so much the movement. Doesn't have to worry about the takedowns, which is Volkov's biggest hole in his game, and just can make it a striking match from a distance, and Greg Hardy's going to be the one that has to move in. And I know he's very explosive, he could probably do that, but he's not going to show anything that Volkov's never seen before, right? Volkov's sparred countless hours against all different body types, against the experience, against the inexperience, and Greg Hardy will fit that inexperienced mold. So this fight is going to be like a wash, I believe, for Volkov. Like, this does nothing for him, besides just keeping the fight at Moscow. But I would have to think they would have someone else, right? Someone else would be ready at this point. I know it's like, 3 weeks out? But that narrative is just not true, because Francis Ngannou put into Twitter that he is ready to step in on 18-day notice to fight Alexander Volkov. He was ready for the fight. He wants to fight. He's been saying this for weeks now, that nobody wants to fight him. They're not giving him a fight. And he'll take on anybody at this point, because he's not going to get a title shot. Most likely, DC and Stipe are going to run it back. Ngannou versus Volkov makes infinitely times more sense than Greg Hardy versus Volkov. And maybe they don't want to risk Francis Ngannou. Maybe they see this as a hit or miss with Greg Hardy. The UFC's thought is, if Greg Hardy wins, that's it, we cash in, we're good, he's going to be a future star. And if he loses, he just wasn't meant to be. And I completely disagree with that narrative, man, because if he wins, he's gonna be in the Shark Tank, and he's not ready to swim. He is actually showing an evolution that is very much rare for an athlete to come from another sport, right? To bring those explosive attributes from the world of American football into MMA, and then actually show an elevation of skills throughout all of his fights, and then potentially throw all of that away, destroy all of that by throwing him up against a top contender in Volkov. It's almost like to show that this guy's actually not that good. You know, it looks like they hate this guy and they're just gonna throw him into the wolves right now. This guy's clearly not ready for this level. It's either you're showing too much respect, overrating his skills, or you're being pretty contemptuous, almost showing disdain for this guy, throwing him against the wolves already just to see him get torn apart. And both sides of that spectrum can have the same kind of damage. You gotta give props to Greg Hardy. I mean, this is his hardest fight by far in his entire life. And he's going into enemy territory against a Bellator world champion, against a guy who's knocked out Verdum, done very well against Derek Lewis, has done very well throughout his career. A lot more experience, 30-7. You gotta give Hardy a lot of credit for taking this fight. He's probably gonna get KO'd badly, but you cannot question the gameness of Greg Hardy. But there's a much bigger continuing problem that the organization is kind of doing, and it shows with this one too. Greg Hardy should not be fighting anybody ranked. He should not be fighting anybody ranked for the next couple years, I believe. I believe Tai Tuivasa or something like that would have been a good step up. Not the number 7 ranked contender in the heavyweight division. For argument's sake, if Greg Hardy beats Volkov by some mere shot, lucky blitz from the outside that Volkov just doesn't see coming, he's just a little bit lax at the moment, what is Greg Hardy going to do now? Who is he gonna fight now? Alistair Overeem, Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blades, Stipe, Junior Dos Santos. I mean, now he's in that territory where Darren Till's almost in, but it's way worse. Much higher consequences for this decision. But the underlying problem is the organization is just rushing these guys too fast. Starting with early on, Yair Rodriguez going on a 5-win streak against all non-contenders, one old BJ Penn, and then getting thrown at Frankie Edgar, who's like a ready title challenger, and Yair gets his face punched in. Kevin Lee getting a 5-fight win streak and then fighting Tony Ferguson for an interim belt. That's a little bit too high for a lightweight division especially. I mean, we got like Mirbek Tysonov who went on like a 7-win streak or whatever and never even got ranked, let alone fighting for a belt. Alexander Hernandez winning 2 fights in the UFC and then gets thrown into Donald Cerrone's head kick. And afterward didn't look that impressive against Francisco Trinaldo, which is not even a step down from his previous competition. Tyson Pedro was coming off 2 wins against guys who are at the very bottom of the light heavyweight division, not even counting the top 15. I'm talking about outside the top 15 and Paul Craig and Khalil Roundtree in the past, and then gets thrown at a top 10 at Ilir Latif and gets out wrestled for the most part and out blitzed, and now he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, getting knocked out by Shogun in his last one. Doo Ho Choi knocked out 3 non-ranked fighters in the first round, and then gets thrown at Cub Swanson, who's coming off 2 wins in a row, and goes to war with him, and then they throw him at Jeremy Stevens, an even higher ranked contender, and gets knocked out in the second round. Sergey Pavlovich was 11-0 in MMA, one of the biggest prospects outside the UFC in the heavyweight division, gets thrown at Alistair Overeem in his first fight in the UFC and gets knocked out in the first round. Darren Till's a big example. Emil Mek, Misha Serkunov. I mean, you guys can fill the rest of the spaces. There's so many prospects that were just not ready for that rocket to the stars. And not everybody grows the same as Conor McGregor, the same as Cody Garbrandt, the same as Israel Adesanya. Those guys can get thrown at the stars right away and perform. Some guys need growing space. Some guys need time to get to that level, and then they'll become that star that you wanted. Look at Anderson Silva for an example. Anderson Silva, before in Pride, he was known as his prospect, and then he started to lose and things weren't going his way, and then eventually when he got into the UFC, he found his stride and he became a world beater. In his case, it took a long time until he became that star, and some fighters need something like that. Maybe not that long like Anderson Silva, but just a little bit of time. Such as George St. Pierre, he had a reasonable amount of time to become that star. I mean, he fought for the championship early, he lost, then he won the belt and lost it, and then he became this mega star in the UFC afterward. I mean, it took him a little bit of time, and some people need that, not 3-4 fights, and now you're fighting Francis Ngannou in Cameroon, or Tony Ferguson on Mars, or something. You like, I mean, you gotta chill out with that. They just get thrusted to the top with a couple wins in the UFC, and it shouldn't be that way, because you don't give him growing space. Thankfully, Sean O'Malley, with the gift of his injuries, I guess you would say, he's kind of built up slowly. I mean, if he never got injured, he'd probably be like the number 10th fighter fighting Henry Cejudo or something, you know? And this thing with Greg Hardy, man, it's just too quick. You destroy prospects because of this. If Greg Hardy beats Volkov by some miracle, he's gonna be fighting the killers of the heavyweight division. And guys that can wrestle now, he has not fought a wrestler yet. But if he beats Volkov, now you have Curtis Blades, now you have DC, now you have Stipe Miocic, you even have Alistair Overeem that can take you down. What are you gonna do now? Now you're up against a style you have never even come across yet. Everybody that he has fought have been strikers or brawlers or so unskilled, and now I can say that. Now I can say they're inexperienced because now he's fighting Volkov. Now you gotta compare the competition. Those guys are mere specks of dust when you compare to the sandstorm that is Volkov. He brings much more wrinkles to the game, a lot of layers that Greg Hardy has just started to peel. And he has like another 100 to go. That is what Volkov is. He's getting so much better. Why throw him now into these guys? He's actually getting better, something you don't see all the time. And if his progression is going to be halted by this loss, that's a wasted product, right? A lot of people want to say it's just striking when the iron's hot, but it's more like they're striking before they smelt the iron in the first place. I don't know the exact reason for doing this, but I guarantee what's going to be said is he's the one that answered the call. Okay, but let me know what you guys think about all this. What do you guys think about this skyrocket strategy that every prospect gets in the UFC? What do you guys think should have happened to Greg Hardy? I know I can see the comments already, but leave that in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.